welcome to a Lawn Fawn video. My name is Kristin, I work here at Lawn Fawn headquarters, and I'm so excited that Kelly has invited me to share this super fun and easy watercolor card with you. I'm going to start out with two new stamp sets from our fall and winter release, Love You Latte and Deck the Halls. I'm also going to use a piece of Tim Holtz Distress watercolor paper. It comes pre-cut to 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches long, which is the perfect size for my card, but you can use any watercolor paper for this technique. You can either use distress ink pads or distress markers for this technique, and I'll be using a mixture of both so that you can see how easily both can be done. I'm going to start by choosing a mug from the Love You a Latte stamp set. I chose this taller mug, but you can use any one that you like. To use a distress ink pad, you just need to tap the stamp onto the ink pad and then dab away any of the lines so that you don't get any harsh edges. Then you can just press your image onto your paper. Some people keep a cup of water on their desk, but I find it easier to just mist some water onto an acrylic block. That way I'm not drenching my brush. You could keep a paper towel on your desk to tap off the extra water, or you can wipe it between your fingers to make sure it's not too wet. Now I'll use my brush to blend the color into the light areas. If you feel like you need more color, like I'm not getting a lot here, you can tap your ink pad onto your acrylic block and pick up some of the color there and put it onto your paper. You can keep adding more and more color until you're satisfied with your image, and you'll see here that I go slowly and only add a little bit of color at a time, because if you add too much, it's much harder to take away color than it is to just add. Next, I'm going to move on to this wintry floral arrangement. I like to start with the images that will be in the front and then fill in the open areas with images that will appear to be in the back. To use the distress markers, I flick some of the ink onto the image and again blot away any harsh lines or ink in the areas that I want to stay lighter. While I have this marker color out, I'll do a couple images at once so that I'm not switching back and forth between pulling out my markers and using my brush. Now that I have some images stamped, I'll take my brush and just move that color around to make the images smooth. I'm going to use the same technique for the rest of this wintry bouquet. So I'm going to play some music and just let you watch. As you saw, I like using the distress markers because you're able to mix the ink on the clear stamp before you press it onto your image. So now that the majority of my image is finished, I wasn't completely happy with my mug, so I just put some of the same chipped sapphire ink onto the stamp again and pressed it onto the page to give the left side of the mug more color. I also wanted to add some of these berries to my image. So at first I colored all three, but then I move on to just coloring one so that I can better determine where I put each one. And I'll just take a tiny bit of water just to smooth out each little berry and make them a little bit different from one another. Now, if you notice at the beginning of this video, I didn't take care to draw out and make sure that my arrangement was centered. And that's because I knew I was going to be using this largest rectangle from the small stitch rectangle die cut set to be able to center my image perfectly without having to pull out a ruler or anything like that. And now that that beautiful stitch rectangle is cut, I can use it to line it up onto my craft mat and center my sentiment perfectly. I'm also going to go over my sentiment with just a tiny bit of water so that it gets the same watercolor look as our bouquet above. I also wanted to use these adorable snowflakes in the set, so I just spread them throughout the background and used my water brush to soften them just like everything else. I realized that I didn't have any ground for this mug to be sitting on, so I colored some ink onto my acrylic block and wet my paper really well and just brought some of that color underneath my mug so that it looked like it was sitting on top of a table. The main reason you want to wet your paper first before bringing on any of that ink is so that you don't get any of those harsh lines, because I don't want to take away from any of the stamping that I did before. I had some space at the bottom of my card front, and so I decided to add some of this beautiful Blue Jay lawn trimmings, and I just adhered it with some of that posted tape that I had used to hold down my rectangle die, and that was fine to hold it until I adhered it to my card base. I took some Wink of Stella and put it around the edges of my card base because that's the only part that you'll see once my rectangle is put on. I used a lot of foam tape just to make sure that my lawn trimming stayed in place and put that onto my card base. Then I used my Wink of Stella pen again and went over my snowflakes and my berries to give them a little shine. And that finishes off my card. I just love how much sparkle that Wink of Stella adds to a solid sheet of paper. Thank you so much for joining me, and I cannot wait to see what you create with this stamp set and with this technique. Bye!